When you think about the ultimate off-road adventure vehicle, an electric truck like the Rivian R1T might not be your first choice. But is this the future of overland? Is the government going to mandate that we switch everything to electric cars? So today, we're going to test a 2023 R1T quad motor adventure pack and see how it does for livability and daily drivability, off-roadability, and most importantly, range. Let's check it out. So the Rivian R1T is a truck that we all know works well in urban environments. The big thing that we're gonna notice immediately with this truck is storage. What it has that no other truck does have that I'm aware of is this gear tunnel. And this gear tunnel is big enough that I can actually completely crawl inside of it, and it's on both sides. You can actually come all the way through. Quite a bit of room. Up front, we've got this frunk. It is roughly deep enough to carry a Porsche 911 Lego set vertically. So this is really nice to just clean, secure storage, normally where the engine goes. So let's hop inside and go through some of the technology that really worked to help this thing go on adventures. So the two major differences of a Rivian and a normal truck are the powertrain is completely different and the air ride suspension. So the air ride suspension has airbags on all four corners, and that allows for ride height adjustability as well as making the suspension firmer or softer. So when you go to the modes, what we're gonna look at is we have two different major mode categories. You have on-road mode and off-road mode. And the on-road mode is going to combine power delivery, what motors are getting what power, how much power they're getting, how that throttle mapping is calculated, all of those different things, traction control, everything you need to go for an all-purpose mode, a conservation mode that's going to optimize range. You have a sport mode that puts the truck down low and really gives it as much power as possible to rail on the street. Then you have snow mode, which is really optimizing for traction, and if you whiskey throttle it, you don't want to crash. If we switch over to off-road mode, we've got 5 different modes in off-road. So we've got all-terrain, rock crawl, soft sand, rally, and drift. So while we aren't here to do a full street performance test, we will mention that this car is really, really fast. 0 to 60 in this car is about 3 seconds, which is completely unreasonable for a truck. And all the batteries are way down at the bottom, which keeps the center of gravity super low. Overall, livability, daily drivability is really good. Obviously, there's some quirks when it comes to charging. As long as you have the infrastructure at your house, you're not going further than the range allows every day. It's a very reasonable daily driver. And honestly, that's all kind of known. What we're curious about is how it actually does for real adventure. And most of the time, adventure takes us off the pavement. So we're gonna hop into the dirt and check it out. We just pulled up to a campsite to demonstrate the Rivian's air suspension system, which allows you to self-level, which is pretty cool. So right now we're 3 degrees nose high, we're 2 degrees kind of rolled off to the side, which is quite a bit when you're setting up camp, especially with a camper on the back. So basically press a button and it'll actually self-level. So that is a pretty neat feature of the Rivian. As you can see, it raised a ton in the rear. Just a couple of minutes, get a level campground, even when you're pretty far off kilter. So on these more Forest Service fire road type of roads where we're kind of driving spirited but pretty conservative, so keeping it like between like 20 and 40 miles an hour and not like trying to pitch every single corner. Nope. And hitting a few bumps. We're seeing about 1.61 miles per kilowatt hour. So that is about a 25%, maybe 30% degradation in range. If we were to go a lot slower, I think we wouldn't have that as much. We might see like a 5 or 10% decrease, but when you're off-road, we're not really here to drive 15 miles an hour. If you're the kind of person that loves kind of like sliding corners and testing the limits a little bit and having fun, this truck does allow you to turn off traction control, and it says completely, but that's actually not true. So we found that if you really get sideways, especially if you get sideways off throttle, so if you're understeering into a corner or trying to get into like a Scandinavian flick, it will shut you down. So you might lose a little bit of power in the corner. That said, this car has so much power, it's not surprising that they wanted to do that. You can really get yourself into trouble quick off-road. It's pretty impressive overall. So today we're driving this trail that kind of takes us up over a mountain pass. It's all been fire roads and kind of like tighter mountain roads leading into this area. And then it drops us down into a rock crawling section. And this was kind of the furthest away that we could get from our charging infrastructure. So this isn't the hardest, most technical rock crawling you've ever seen. but it'll be a pretty good indicator of what 99% of people are gonna see at the outer limits of off-roading one of these trucks. We're starting to get into a little bit more rocky terrain, so we're gonna pull over here and throw this thing into rock crawl mode. So while we wait for this thing to lift up, I think it's going a little slow because that air compressor was overheated. Underneath the car, there's a ton of underbody protection. Because the drive motors are at each corner, you don't have big solid live axles to contend with, or things that really hang down super low. A lot of cladding, a lot of protective parts. Still feels maybe a little bit plasticky, but there has to be a ton of protection there because that's where all the batteries are. And what we don't want to do is puncture those things. I think Rivian probably did a good job of designing for that. One of the big things with all these height changes is the camber of the truck also changes, which means like where the contact patch of that tire is. So when it's in full low stuff mode, you're gonna be sitting like this and just really wearing out the inside bottom of the tire. Right height high mode, you can see it's kind of in like that and to do the outside. So if you're gonna do a bunch of like drag racing and canyon carving, just really sliding corners, maybe put it in rock crawl mode and do some burnouts to offset the wear. We'll hop in, hopefully get into some tougher obstacles down here. Nothing super challenging on this trail, so we'll take some hard lines and see what we can get into. So even from the seating position here, your sight picture on the highest mode is totally different. Like, it's much harder to see over the hood, similar to how it might be in a lifted truck. You're really elevated. It's kind of a novelty, the fact that you can be down so low where it feels like you might be in like a little Subaru Impreza, all the way up to what you might see in a lifted midsize pickup truck. So in rock crawling mode, we're coming down a mountain. So it's pretty much all regenerative braking. And we're actually seeing the best range we've ever gotten in this truck, which is 4 miles per kilowatt hour, which is huge. I mean, that's double the standard range of this vehicle. We're gonna turn back around and go up the hill so we see what the performance actually is like in real life. Most of the time you're getting into a rock crawling situation, you're doing it to go up and over something, so we don't only wanna go down it. And the truck has a really nice, like a hold assist. So you can see right here, and on my foot on the brake, I push this button, it's gonna be terrifying. Free fall mode. So go back into this, hold start, back up just a little bit. Right, go like that. It's gonna stop for us. So some of this tech is pretty nice. So I might be sort of strong, but I am not this strong. And the reason that it's possible to pick up the corner like this is because of the torsional rigidity of the frame and kind of how we're centered up on this obstacle. So each drive motor is driving power to the wheel that needs the traction. So the car is going to go through and select all of those wheels. That'll happen in a normal internal combustion motor when you select like a locking differential. So it'll drive both wheels on one axle, or the front wheels or the rear wheels independently, depending on whether or not you have front or rear lockers. On the Rivian, each motor is independent. So it might still try to spin this to grab traction, but it definitely will spin that to get it. So while bouncing around on the rocks is never comfortable, it actually is particularly jarring in this truck. So the compromise that you're gonna make when you have all these adjustable ride heights is the wheel in the wheel well, the actual tire, is going to be at a different height, and there's only a limited amount of range that it can cycle through. So when you're at the full bottom part of that cycle, when the truck's all the way jacked up, there's very, very, very little down travel that the wheel has. So it has some up travel, but when it like comes off of a bump, the tire just shoots out to the bottom and just limits out. So it's just really, really harsh. I would say that the rock crawling mode in the Rivian is more of either novelty or survivability. So if you really are getting in over your head and you want to get out of it, it'll get you through, but it's not something that I would go do for fun. So after going uphill for about 15 minutes, our range went from 4 miles per kilowatt hour going downhill to 0.5 miles per kilowatt hour. Add the two together, we're still over 2 miles per kilowatt hour, which is actually still above average. So I'd like to see more of a long-term test of an actual trail that you're going up and over in rock crawling mode, maybe a more technical trail than this. But there's a very high likelihood that in these slow speeds, there's no real aerodynamic drag. You might see really good economy. You might see 2 or even more miles per kilowatt hour, which is comparable to what you're gonna get on the street. So we find ourselves here, maybe a little too often, at the charging station for Electrify America in front of the Target Supercenter. And that's really the only charging infrastructure for this truck in our town, which is a bummer. So on the street, to get like a comfortable baseline of performance for the Rivian, we're seeing about probably more like 2.2 miles per kilowatt hour. When we took it off-road though, we did see about a 25% decrease down to about 1.5 to 1.6 miles per kilowatt hour. So you are gonna drop that range down. If you had 250 miles before, you're gonna walk away with maybe like 180 later. And while that's all reasonable, everything is a function of how far are you from the charging station. So there's a lot of areas we like going that we couldn't go, a lot of rock crawling trails that we wanted to go on that are a little harder than what we did before, so we couldn't actually make it there unless we were gonna trailer the truck. So until that infrastructure gets better, you are going to be limited in where you can go. If you're looking for a daily driver, maybe you're cross-shopping against the Maverick and you live in the city, you live somewhere urban, you're really focused on your environmental impact, or you're focused on minimizing your commute cost, or you're focused on having just a quiet, nice, high-end car, this is a great solution for that. And you might find yourself going to Yosemite once a quarter, once every 6 months. This is a great solution. This will totally work well for those needs. Or if you camp a lot locally, if you maybe just go to the beach and go surf, and you're not really trying to go on giant epic road trips throughout like the American Southwest or up in the high mountains of Colorado or through Montana to rural areas. I think the real adventurous spirit and the Rivian overlap is for someone who might define themselves more of a early adopter or a futurist. So if you're the kind of person that like wants to see if this is possible, I think there's a lot of opportunity to push the limits beyond what most people think they can do, but that's gonna mean it's gonna take more time, which in and of itself is gonna be an adventure. Filling up with gas for most of the big trips that we do and the places that we get to go, like going down to Baja, going into really rural parts of Montana, it's really hard to beat an internal combustion truck. But if I lived in the city, or if I had maybe more than one vehicle, or wanted a daily driver and had an adventure vehicle alongside, the Rivian's a really cool thing to learn about, to understand, and it is super fun. I mean, there's no doubt that there's a ton of performance here. So if you have any questions, hit us up in the comments. Anything else you want to see in this build series, the next phase for this build is going to be integrating a camper, and there's a whole host of problems with that. In terms of the interface, Rivian, like building this truck differently, built everything to interface into our Go Fast camper completely differently. So we're gonna go build series on the camper, build series on how to build this truck out without completely ruining its functionality, whether it's range or off-road performance, and then taking on a big shakedown test. So we'd love to hear what you guys want to see, what recommendations you think we should look at in terms of aftermarket products, or just your feedback on this channel in general. So subscribe, comment, let us know how we did.